Today, we're talking to Sagar Batchu from Speakeasy and Mark Martin from SolarWinds about the ways API integration is being revolutionized and how they approach building remote teams. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
Are you both in San Francisco today?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Nice. And then how did you two meet each other?
So Mark and his team were trying out different products in our space, and Greg, who is on Mark's team, I believe, I first came across him when I think I saw a LinkedIn post from him where he said something like, "Oh, I just come back to this space of Open API after several years. I'm pretty excited to see what tools have evolved in the space." And he named a few, and then at the end he said, "I really like what Speakeasy is doing." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Okay, this guy likes to speak his mind, and I appreciate that and give feedback." So we connected there. I think we connected on Slack too, and he started using our product. We connected with Mark, so it was pretty organic. It was a pretty organic encounter, honestly.
And then Mark, on your side, what questions were you guys asking that caused you to explore this?
Well, first of all, let me say, Greg is a gem, and I've worked with Greg even before SolarWinds. He's very opinionated and doesn't filter out his feelings. So when he says Speakeasy is great, he means it. So I just wanted to point that out. We had been talking about, we had internal APIs already. We federate some Swagger endpoints for, because we're on the platform team. We're building things to, accelerate product engineers, building observability tools. You can get away with a lot internally in terms of developer experience when you're trying to build something quickly like we were. You can incur some tech debt. You have a budget for it, but we wanted to, of course, take it to the next level because we knew that it was important to expose the same APIs to our customers and partners, right? You only really get one impression to give them. So we had talked about releasing SDKs, and that's when I asked Greg, "Hey, can you evaluate?" We always start with open source tools, of course, he used some of them in anger, just to try it out. But that's when he stumbled across Speakeasy, and like Sagar said, it was totally organic.
And what type of content were you putting out for Speakeasy? Was it just the social interaction of you guys on LinkedIn, or were they reading your blog post, or what?
Yeah, I think I suspect one of the ways he found us is we actually do a lot of work with the open source generators. So even though, funnily enough, you could claim that they're a competition in some way, we find that ultimately what it's doing is creating a market and creating awareness around this idea that you need developer experience for your APIs, and the open source tools are a great way to get started, often not the best enterprise solution. And I think we were running ads or potentially doing blog posts around the open source. And so people who would encounter open source would then see us, consider us as an enterprise option if they're looking for something more serious. I believe that's what Greg initially saw.
So Mark, was it the right decision?
Yes, absolutely. So far, when Greg gave me the demo, I really had no concept that this was possible so quickly. And I was sold right away. It was kind of a no-brainer for me because we did this thing early on in the product where it's you want to win a customer, so you go spend a weekend writing some maybe not totally production-ready code to get a Terraform provider out there. You know what I mean? So I had hands-on experience with working with our APIs in terms of building a Terraform provider for our tool. Once Greg demoed the actual Go SDK generation, and then I saw that Speakeasy has the Terraform generation capability, I was just like, let's do this. Yeah.
And SolarWinds is a huge company. You guys have been around forever. For people who don't know, what does SolarWinds do?
Yeah. So our mission is to provide, easy to use tools for, historically it's been like network admins and IT folks. So, we've evolved, we've grown both through like acquisitions and new product development. So, now we encompass like all of the observability space. And additionally, we have service desk products. So we're doing, IT service management and infrastructure management. So our company is about, I want to say over 2,000 employees. We're distributed across the globe. Wherever you can think of, we have a presence. The biggest part of our customer base is from our self-hosted tools. We call it now SolarWinds Observability Self-Hosted. And these are on-prem deployments where you stand up our infrastructure with your own database. Where I am is in the SaaS SolarWinds Observability platform. And so I manage the teams building our, high throughput data ingestion pipeline, the analytics database for all of the telemetry data, the detection capabilities like alerting and AI ops capabilities. It runs the gamut, and we're converging on one platform for all of SolarWinds that can be self-hosted or using the SaaS platform.
So you manage multiple teams?
Yeah, I have about 8 teams in India, Europe, the US. We're very distributed, and it's about, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it's kind of an equal distribution.
What are you learning right now as a leader?
So, I was thinking about this. If we're talking about hiring remote teams in the US, through your hiring practices, you are trying to get like diversity of viewpoints and folks, but it's usually not like a huge lift to get them aligned. And same with on-site locations like in Europe or India. However, getting them to fit together is pretty challenging without a lot of attention. So you kind of shift from choreography to orchestration. And actually, my boss likes to talk about this a lot: choreography versus orchestration. We try to do as much as we can as leaders to get away from the orchestration part, because the outcomes are not as great. The teams are not as autonomous, and I guess you could say the skin in the game is not as real for those teams. So you want to move towards having autonomous teams that are loosely choreographed that bring great outcomes.
Yeah. So what's like a really difficult thing that you've recently learned or figured out?
You want the slightly spicy.
Yeah, slightly spicy. Like if it was a chicken sandwich, it would be like a spicy chicken sandwich from McDonald's,
Yeah, I guess like the spiciest thing I could share would be you have to have teams that are aligned on the same like customer profile and product that you're building. When they have different ideas of what that is, it's just going to be like a failure of coordination and outcomes. So that's what I'm struggling with internally and learning and trying to navigate how to drive towards like, hey, this is the customer and this is the experience that we're trying to deliver. Mm-hmm. And that is extremely hard to do when you're across the ocean, right? From the teams.
Now, Sagar, I've experienced this as well. I'm sure you have too, especially being founders. If you would have talked to me when I was in my early 20s and you were to ask me about myself, I'd say I hate repeating myself. So it's been pretty odd that I've become a public speaker and go tour the same talk in like 50 different places. Right? But what I found out is that's communication, right? It's setting the vision, explaining what it is, syncing people up, but then continuing to make sure that that stays in place. And that's the difficult thing because it's monotonous, it's repetitive. You have to find ways to deliver it you can't be condescending. You have to keep it original and fresh. So how do you get different teams aligned, Sagar, since you're here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I completely agree with you. Like as a leader or as a founder, sometimes you think you've come up with the grand plan and it's super simple and you just state the goal to your team. And then you walk away from it and a week or 2 weeks later, it's kind of diffused and diluted. And you're like, wait, but it was a one single line in an Notion doc. It should really just like click for everyone. But ultimately, like people have a lot of things they're doing every day, especially at a startup, there's an immense amount of context switching going on. And so I've personally found that I have to kind of get over my own inhibitions around like reiterating something a couple of times and doing it constantly through the week, at like different levels, at the team level, at our like all hands as a company. Sometimes I early on, I used to forget to do this, and I realized like those goals were just getting, very quickly diluted into the startup chaos. And so I think what I found works for me now is I think you have to obviously clearly communicate the goal, and I find you have to keep surfacing it in different contexts. In that like memo that you send out to your team, in the Jira ticket that's filed, in the like customer support channel, there's probably different interpretations of that goal that could be brought up in different places, and I find that really does help. And I also think you need to rely on the other leaders and other founding employees of a company who are good at carrying that message forward and also adding their own flavor on top.
Well said. Yeah. It's like double slit management, right? The double slit experiment. That's how I felt so often as an early leader, because it's like, if I'm looking at it, it's working. The moment I take my eyes off it, it stops working. Double slit management, right? But the things that have helped me and that you inspired just now hearing you speak was like, I found if I could, first of all, reducing the number of outcomes that I'm looking for. So for me, figuring out like what's the closest thing and how it ties to revenue. So I have a justification. So I need a small set of items to like continually reinforce, so it's manageable for me to reinforce them. And to do that, I use revenue as a justification, right? Revenue, customer happiness, because without that, there's no magic paycheck fairy, and that's what we need to exist. So customers helped me reduce my priorities, which allowed me to be more repetitive. And like you said, like just figuring out different ways to resurface that goal. One small thing I have found is like if I want to change a behavior within my company or within some teams, to link it to an existing behavior. So rather than just saying, hey, just do something new, trying to get them to associate whenever I do A, B should happen. And they're already doing A, right? They're already doing this one thing continuously and well. And then I try to like attach to it a little bit. But, my success rate's like 50 to 70%, so don't listen to me.
No, totally agree. I mean, I can even share from this past quarter that just kicked off for us, like to your point of like reducing goals, right? I kind of started the quarter. It was very, obviously the startup, very autonomous. There's a lot of like bottoms up product leadership that happens. But I do feel the importance to like set some clear goals also top down to help kind of, merge those things together. First time I wrote out our kind of product roadmap for the quarter, I had like 15 different goals in there, and that was terrible. I reread that and actually just deleted everything and just have one goal. It is just user acquisition. We have a percentage KPI that we're tracking. We're going to move that up by like a 10x improvement, right? And that's it. And I even kind of steered clear of determining the projects that we're going to do, and just said, look, the team can determine the projects that you want to do. Here's a couple ideas, but ultimately the only thing we're tracking is that customer acquisition. As a startup, the lifeblood is getting customers and getting more customers faster. And so that's now our only stated product goal. Don't tell my competitors, but like that's the only thing.
They're busy. Yeah. They're busy chasing their tail anyways. You guys are going to be the leaders in this space. I judge you mostly on your product and your brand. Like when I see things that look beautiful, I'm like, that's going to do well. I don't know why, but if you're smart enough to figure out that you need a branding person and you need your stuff to look good, you're typically smart enough to figure out how to make the business work.
Totally. It's funny you said that. We just hired a design engineer at the company. Mm-hmm. And design engineers are kind of this rare breed. They're kind of like, I don't know, platypuses. If someone described them to you, you wouldn't believe they exist. Like they kind of go pixels to prototype, like they're everything in between, right? They do the design, but they're also really good at engineering. A little bit hard to find, but we found this one guy, very excited. But sorry, digression, but to your point on brand.
Let's go with narwhal. Yeah. They're a little bit cuter, and they're narwhal. Also magical. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this guy's amazing. The first day he walked into the office, he's wearing an AI tag on his shirt, and I was like, this guy's perfect. This our design is going to be amazing. It's going to be cool, innovative. People are going to remember it. Anyway, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Brand is important.
Hey, Mark, you actually mentioned something pretty interesting, that you've got these 3 groups of people in 3 different countries, and there's different cultures in all of the different areas that you mentioned. I think you said US, India, and Europe, right?
Yeah.
And so you've had to go through this process of communicating complex ideas across cultures. And what have you learned there? Do you have any stories of like times that you mistakenly communicated something and it was interpreted the wrong way, or what's some lessons you have there?
I don't know that I've necessarily put my foot in my mouth very much, so that's a good sign. It's very important to go on site regularly and hang out. Go have, in the case of Europe, you're at the bar until the wee hours of the morning. In the case of India, you're hitting a ton of restaurants. But that is very important, and just listening mainly has been extremely valuable for me. Letting folks just kind of spill the beans on how it's going, and synthesizing that, right, taking it away.
So let's say I'm a new engineer. Well, I'm an engineering manager, and I'm in Texas, which I'm not, but we're going to role play here. So I'm a Texas-based engineering manager. I've been engineering manager. We have hybrid teams. So some are remote, some are in person for our Texas company. And I just got a new job offer where I will be managing teams in multiple countries. And I'm coming to you, Mark, and you've only got one piece of advice that you're allowed to give me. What would that be?
Make time to talk to your team, like in the beginning, almost every day. It doesn't really matter what you talk about. You have to establish a relationship and a trust. If you don't have that trust from them that you're there and you're listening, they're going to assume that you're going to make decisions like while they're asleep without their involvement at all. And that just sort of like reduces their like autonomy and self-direction.
I completely agree with that, actually. So one way I think about it is like if they were sitting in an office next to you every day, you'd probably be bantering about one thing or the other. And it does feel weird sometimes to get on like a Zoom call with a remote team and just chit chat about nothing. It's definitely more forced, but I think you kind of have to force yourself to do it. Like just push through it and do it. I completely agree with Mark. Without that, there's just not that trust. You don't want them to feel like they're an offshore team, right? Ideally, you're trying to create the sense that you're all in the same place. You're in it together. Nothing just beats the time and the availability. Even sometimes just saying like you're available, you could book a meeting with me. I've worked with a couple of offshore teams in the past, and I think Mark also rightly pointed out, like doing it up front is really important. It's really hard to do it later, I find. like once decisions have been made that maybe they don't agree with, it's really hard to like go back and try to rebuild that trust. It's much easier to do it when in that kind of honeymoon period of having a new team.
Yeah, one of the things that we do over here, and we're less than 20 people, is on Mondays we'll have a 30-minute meeting, and we'll either do breakout rooms depending on how many people are available to make the meeting, so that we want to keep it like less than 5 people per breakout room. And then what we do is we'll say, oh, how'd your weekend go? And like everybody kind of talks for a few minutes and shares about how their weekend went. And then we come back in the main call where we give an update on the business. And then on Thursdays, we do Feel Good Thursday. So this morning we did Feel Good Thursday. My feel good is I'm going camping this weekend with my kids. So that's exciting. And then that way we all kind of get to know each other a little bit and have some conversation without it being too like forced, you know, because it's relevant to like what you're feeling good about Thursday or what you did that weekend.
Yeah. And it's what I like to interact in Slack a lot. So we're all in Slack. That's our like central point of interaction. And like, I think I'm in like 100 Slack channels.
Wow. You're Slack master.
But I do go through and I try to like process most everything and understand what everybody's talking about, sort of like walking the rounds if I were in a factory or something. I make it a point to like chime in threads, and even if it's like, you know, one of my managers sharing that he's like in Sicily or something, like it's good to interact and the teams to be able to see they're like interacting with them.
Yeah. And what type of issues do you face? So like Slack, Josh and I work really closely together, but sometimes when I'm slacking him, like a message will not come across right, or he'll be in a different mood than me, will be unsynced because we're not together in person. So the interpretation changes. Have you had that happen? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, and actually, like Slack in particular is really good about the huddle button, and I encourage people to just like, if something's not clear, punch that button, and I will just answer. If I'm slacking you while I'm in another call, I'll just put the call on hold because you know, unless it's really important, I just make sure that like they can call me without like feeling weird about it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I found that the shortest distance between 2 points is communication. So I try to advertise as much as possible to the team. Like if anything seems off, the thing that we need to do immediately is get together to figure it out. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Sagar, what about you? You ever have some miscommunication situations with Slack? How did you handle those?
Happens, I feel like all too often actually in a startup where I think the density and intensity of Slack messages feels like 2x than what it was where I worked before. And yeah, it's controlled chaos really, our Slack, because our Slack is also like our primary support channel. There's on-call alerts firing off. There's like support messages coming in. We have a pretty distributed product that runs on GitHub, and so like Slack is now a supremely overloaded channel, and in the middle of all of that, like trying to have a management-related conversations, that feels absurd. It feels absolutely absurd. Personally, I've been trying a new tactic recently, which is like if it's something that has at all like any chance of being sensitive or being misinterpreted, I've just been waiting to do it in the one-on-one time during the week with the team member. It is a little impractical because sometimes you do need to like address something directly, but it has made me really question like what is urgent to get across to someone versus what can wait and be kind of rolled up into a bigger discussion. So that's been my tactic, and I think it's maybe idiosyncratic to us, but Slack is just this wild west of alerts and comms right now, and it feels like throwing in a sensitive conversation in the midst is just like asking for like misinterpretation. So yeah, I've been pulling it out for that reason.
The number of times that I've sent a message, like I said it in my head, I'm probably standing in the kitchen or like doing something, so I'm going to type it out real quick, hit send, and then get not good feedback on it. And then I go back and I read it and I'm like, oh, that had a double meaning. Like if you read it in one tone, it's like really good. You read it in another tone and it's like really bad. So I have been doing my best to like acting like an LLM and like checking my answer before I give it back. Like, is there any way this can be misinterpreted? If so, don't send it. So yeah, text-based communications is rough. It's hard.
I worked with a PM once who insisted on including at least one emoji in every Slack message you sent to make the intent clear. I thought it was totally silly for a long time.
That's a really good idea.
But
that's a good idea.
Right. But sometimes it creeps in. And to make the intent clear, sometimes I put some sort of emoji in it.
This is maybe a weird analogy, or maybe too software of analogy, but I kind of find the tech comms thing with Slack kind of like the batch and event streaming problem in data engineering, right? On one hand, like when you are streaming events and doing like real-time engineering, often the people consuming it need to like put an effort on filtering out certain events. Like there's a concept of a publisher and a subscriber, right? A publisher consumer, and the consumer does have to like choose what to listen to, filter out things, deal with like missed events. And so that's what Slack feels like to me. It's like a human event bus, right? And it's just this explosion of events, and you put out some, other people put out some, and then the stuff you consume, you have to choose what channels to be part of. Like sometimes the right answer is boot yourself from a channel because it's like creating too much noise for you. And I think things like email and one-on-ones are like batch processing, right? Like you pile up a number of things that need to be spoken about. You probably process it 3-4 times. The shower thoughts you add on, and then finally you kind of lay it on the other, well, not laid on, but like you talk to the other person, and like there's a lot of pre-processing that's happened. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. Maybe they've spent too long in the world of like Spark and Hadoop.
Dude, you win the most nerdy but relatable engineering leadership advice I think we've ever gotten. Like the pub sub leadership style, right?
Yeah, I remember vaguely a couple of years ago listening to a Software Engineering Daily podcast with one of the core engineers on Slack's graph search team, and he was talking about how internally they always refer to Slack as like the human event bus. Like that was one of the maybe developer visions for what this was.
I like that. What's the vision for Speakeasy?
Yeah, the vision for Speakeasy really is that simply put, like APIs are way harder than they need to be. They're like messy. They are some of the more core and oldest technology we have, and yet it feels like very underinvested when you compare it to some of the newer stuff around. And so we're really trying to bring some of that modern developer experience to the API lifecycle. It's about speed, performance, quality, being able to get you to great APIs quickly. And so, Speakeasy's vision is to be a de facto toolkit for API engineers. Whether you're building the API for external users, internal users, we want to be your go-to toolkit and not try to replace the job, but really give you a lot of leverage in terms of what you can do. So that's the vision.
Mark, you think Speakeasy's living up to that vision?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What I want to know is how does Sagar feel about GraphQL?
How do I feel about GraphQL?
In the context of leadership advice.
In the context of leadership advice. Should I try to make another crazy analogy?
Yes, let's do it.
Let me try it. GraphQL is like, it's all about inversion of control, right? Like it's amazing for autonomy. People building with GraphQL can do whatever they want. But at scale, it becomes really messy because there's no guidance on what the right thing to do is. And so I feel like if you want to draw that to leadership as you scale, as Mark said earlier, when you have super autonomous teams, that's phenomenal. They move quickly, decisions are made, like people feel like stuff's getting shipped. But at scale, there's going to be noise, there's going to be chaos. And without a little like top-down guidance on the North Star, you're going to run into scaling problems. And so you need a good old REST API to save the day.
That's great.
Yeah. He did it, Mark.
Did it. That was amazing. I love it.
Oh my gosh, that's founder right there for you, making it happen.
Yeah. I'll even extend it further, and I'll say that's why I think REST works great for public APIs, because the people you're working with, they're not necessarily teams internally that have shared culture and shared backgrounds, shared guidance. Like, they're developers anywhere and everywhere, and so you're letting them basically write queries against your database, which is, to me, has always been a really scary thing. I know there's a lot of good tech like Apollo and stuff that will let you do federation, predefined queries, but ultimately at scale, it feels like GraphQL is not the right solution for really at scale products. REST has kind of proven itself. I still love GraphQL, especially when you're doing like UI development internally at a company. I think it's amazing. But it definitely has had its honeymoon phase, and I think don't want to be too harsh on it, but I think the scoreboard kind of speaks for itself in that something like 85% of all APIs today are REST. I think a little over 10% is GraphQL, and a couple percent is gRPC. They're all growing. The whole market's growing. It's not saying you shouldn't go use it, but like, when in doubt, go with the simple option. If you're not sure why to pick GraphQL, I would go with the REST and then revisit later.
Are there any popular? I've never programmed against GraphQL service that I'm aware of. Everything I'm aware of, I believe, is REST. Is there any main popular, like, household name services that use that as their API?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, for a long time, GitHub was...
Oh, they did?
Externally it was GraphQL APIs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now they do REST as well. I think there was a blog post some time ago around like the struggles they had scaling it. They do both, but the REST APIs, I think they're focused right now. Don't quote me on that.
We're going to quote you. That's actually going to be the clip of the show to highlight. It'll go in the newsletter.
GitHub messes up GraphQL.
Dude, this has been great. Let's start to wrap up here. If people want to try Speakeasy, they want to get their hands on it, they want to explore, it might be the tool that they need to solve the problem they're experiencing today. Where did they go? How did they do it?
Yeah, really easy. Speakeasy.com. You can hit the big try it now button. You'll make an account. You'll follow a nice little quick start experience, and hopefully in a few minutes you have your first SDK.
Oh, amazing. If people want SolarWinds observability, where do they go?
They go to SolarWinds.com, navigate to SolarWinds observability, and you can sign up for a free trial right on the website. And first steps are you can instrument your APM or instrument your application with APM using our OpenTelemetry-based tools. You can spin up our agent with a one-liner in Bash, which will download and spin up infrastructure monitoring. You can install a Helm chart to monitor your Kubernetes cluster. Lots of different ways to get data in easily.
Nice. So SolarWinds.com and Speakeasy.com. Those are the sites. Josh is going to put links in the show notes below for everybody that wants to click a link. And that's it. We made a podcast. How do you feel?
I feel great. I feel like I bashed on GraphQL a little bit, which is
good. You did just the right amount. Just the right amount.
I wanted more, but
you wanted more.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you would like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.